The word conversion is something we often think of at the beginning of a religious awakening. A person is a convert. They've converted to a new way of thinking. St. Augustine spoke of conversion as a simultaneous turning toward and turning away. One can't happen without the other. If one turns toward the Lord, one turns away from the things that are not of the Lord. Conversion. Conversio, adversio, turning toward, turning away. Bernard Lonergan was a Canadian a Jesuit theologian of the 20th century. He spoke of conversion in terms of an interlocking series of events by which we turn over to the Lordship of Jesus Christ, one part of our lives after another. Our hearts, our minds, our lives, our goals, our desires, our dreams, our hurts, our failures, our fears, all of which come before the Lord in this interlocking chain of events by which we allow God's grace into one part of our lives after another. We are converted in one area, and then we see ourselves and the Lord and life itself in a different way and realize, oh, there's another part of my life that's unconverted. Little by little, we see those parts of our lives that remain unconverted, and God's grace invites us gently, sometimes not so gently if we're open to it, to turn that part of our lives over to His Lordship. When God does that, it's always a beautiful experience. But God does it. We can't convert ourselves. That's called the heresy of Pelagianism. And you know, Pope Benedict XVI said that's the heresy of our age. People trying to earn God's love, people trying to convert themselves by their own efforts instead of relying on God's grace for conversion. Thomas Aquinas, the greatest theological mind of the Middle Ages, said we need God's assistance to choose the greater good. The invitation of God is always to move above where we are in this life, to look above that with our desires, our tastes, to look above where we are in our fears and our hurts, and to choose the greater good in all that we want and all that we do. By this grace, we may recognize the sin we have chosen, the sin we have entered into, our serious voluntary sins that have moved us away from God's grace and God's presence in our lives. But the grace of conversion is not about guilt. It's not about punishing ourselves for our sins. It's not about the torture of realizing how far we have moved from God or how our sins have kept us from growing closer to God. No, if God reveals our sins to us, it is to draw us closer to Himself. And the grace of conversion, which always begins with God, it is a gift given, a gift received, is a gift that wants us to move beyond our sins to choose the greater good. Indeed, there are three approaches to conversion that we can take. One is based on the fear of God's punishment. We hear that in the preaching of some televangelists. God will get you. It's all the prophecy in the end times that bring about conversion in the present moment based on the fear of God's future punishment. Oh, it works, and there are advantages to it. But God is not a God of fear. God doesn't want to bring us to conversion out of fear of His punishment. God prefers to love us into conversion. Bishop Totilo, who was our bishop for 14 years in the Diocese of Harrisburg, used to say every year to those who were coming into the church, "You were loved into the church. And that is the truth. A second approach to conversion is one that focuses on the past. If the first, the fear of God, focuses on the future, the second focuses on the past. God has always been faithful to me. God has always been faithful to His people. The martyr Polycarp, a bishop, 86 years old, was brought before the magistrate. Actually, the governor of that Roman territory was a friend of his. The friend whispered in his ear, "Polycarp, as you stand in the stadium surrounded by people who are cheering for your martyrdom, who want us to kill you because you belong to Christ." Polycarp, his friend, said, "Just deny the Lord. Just do it privately to me. Nobody will know." And Polycarp's response is classic. "God has always been faithful to me through my 86 years of life. Not once has God ever failed me. Not once will I deny Him." Understanding the history of God's faithfulness to His people and to me brings about a surrender to His grace, which after all is conversion. A third approach to conversion looks at how I experience God in the present moment. God's grace opens my eyes to the futility of sin, to the recognition that my sins have really gained nothing for me. St. Thomas Aquinas says the surest way to convince a person that things won't satisfy their desire for God is to give them things. And once they have those things, they'll realize this isn't working. How many times have you heard people say, "Well, I've tried it my way. Now, God, we've got to try it your way." There was a young man who came into our parish a few years ago at the Easter Vigil. That really was his moment of surrender to God. "I've tried it, Lord, my way. Didn't work. Let me try it your way." We hear about those who came to the bottom of the barrel, rock bottom in their lives, recognized the futility of where they were, and turned to God. The oft-repeated line is, "If there is a God, come to me now, I need you." God's grace opens our souls, our eyes, our spiritual beings to the futility of the sin we have chosen for ourselves. But He teaches us that there is a higher way. He lifts us beyond our desire for sin to give us a thirst for grace, a thirst for more, a thirst for goodness, a thirst for union with Him. And so this third approach to conversion is one that focuses on our thirst for God, our thirst for more in life, the recognition that everything I have chosen and done for myself that is worldly hasn't worked. There is a higher reality. This is Ignatian spirituality. Our thirst for God, our desire for God, our hunger for God, our need for God impels us to grow beyond ourselves, grow beyond our past, to grow beyond our fears and hurts, to grow beyond the small ways of thinking that have enveloped us through life, to open ourselves to the greater glory of God, to open ourselves to a love that transforms us. God bless you.